Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing Atlanticist preoccupations and the importance of Asia. This is kind of just a video I just thought of making, something it's kind of been percolating in the back of my brain. You know, I find it really fascinating that Americans especially, I understand Europeans and the British, for example, being very Atlantic oriented because they're in the Atlantic, fully in the Atlantic. They're not anywhere else physically, although, yeah, you could argue the British maybe because of their colonies and some things like that. And the Europeans have a presence outside the Atlantic. Please don't burn me in the comments for saying, oh, Europeans only stay in the Atlantic. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is it's a paradigm, you know, this sort of Atlanticist paradigm where sort of the center of the world is in the Atlantic, if you will, and the rest of the world is just sort of out there on the periphery doing whatever. I sort of think it was in the Star Wars prequel where Anakin Skywalker is referring to Tatooine. He says, what are you doing out here on the outer rim? You know, that we're sort of way outside the solar system of where all the action is, so to speak. And I think there sort of is kind of an Atlantic preoccupation, especially among Americans. You know, I think it's probably because most of the major cities, especially the founding cities in America, were in the Atlantic. They weren't, or sort of on the Atlantic, on the eastern seaboard. And for that reason, maybe our focus of attention is often sort of dragged over in that direction. I think it also probably has something to do with it that, you know, for example, Britain's over there, they're an English-speaking country. So again, because we have the similarity of language, we constantly are sort of drifting our attention over to what's going on in the Atlantic. But the Pacific is a big place, and let's not have any illusions moving forward. The action's going to be in the Pacific. The money to be made is going to be in Asia over the course of the coming months and years. And I even think I did a recent video talking about what I thought might be a so-called UASA shift, where the sort of epicenter of technological innovation and discovery may be shifting sort of away from Silicon Valley. And I think it's going to explode, quite honestly, in the Pacific Rim, in the Pacific region, what's sometimes referred to as the Indo-Pacific now, which is kind of a new term, but I kind of get it because, you know, India is going to be heavily involved in all of this, and then you got Russia and China who are doing new things, and you're going to see increasing dynamism. But let's not forget what I guess you could call free Asia, you know, Korea, Japan, down here in Southeast Asia, Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, these kind of, Indonesia, you know, and then you got Australasia, like Australia and New Zealand. There's a lot of economic activity. There's a lot going on, and there's going to be a lot more going on as Asia continues what can only be described as heavy industrialization. I mean, communications, mass transportation, energy sector, it's going to explode, quite honestly. I don't mean to get hyperbolic here, and I don't mean to sort of put too fine a point on it or quote-unquote oversell it, but man, like, I get it. There's important things that happen in the Atlantic, and that's kind of the cradle of Western civilization, if you will. But if anybody is looking at any of the metrics associated with geoeconomics, the action is Asia. The action is in the Pacific. It's not going to be in the Atlantic in the future. I'm not saying there's not going to be things that happen over there. I'm simply saying if you want to know what the future of heavy manufacturing is in the world, you're probably going to want to look over to Asia. You're probably going to want to look over to the Pacific Rim. It's not going to so much be, I just don't see them churning out a lot of oil tankers, for example, in the Atlantic region to the level that I think it's possible we could see that in the Pacific. And maybe it's not oil tankers, I don't know. Heavy rail, light rail, heavy industrial manufacturing, light industrial manufacturing, communications. Communications, I think, in Eurasia is going to be huge moving forward, not to mention, again, the Pacific. And then meanwhile, as countries, for example, like India industrialize, or as the ASEAN region continues to industrialize, I would argue Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and the Philippines, to some extent Indonesia, are kind of in the beginning phases. Thailand probably a little further along than others, especially in the rail sector, I think, with Thailand. But again, I even hate the term now being used for developing. I don't hate it, but I just think it's kind of a misnomer. I think the better word is industrializing. The Pacific countries, the countries here in Asia, are industrializing at a rapid rate. Yes, you've got Korea and Japan that have already done this, and you have sort of the tiger nations that did this before and then kind of fell back in the wake of the Asian financial crisis, and we sort of had the ramifications of all that. Long story short, though, at the end of the day, I think and let's go back historically. Prior to about 150, 200 years ago, all the economic action was in Asia. That's why you saw a lot of the European powers whose main claim to fame out here was basically just manufacturing of better weapon systems. That's what it came down to. But that's why they were out here. They were wanting to interact with these trade centers. They wanted to make money, quite frankly. That's what it came down to. I think we're seeing a reversion to that mean. I think we're seeing not so much the rise of Asia, but the return of Asia and the Pacific region to the forefront of geoeconomics where it once was some 150 years ago.